Hey, good morning, everybody out there, wherever you are listening to. You are on another episode of Performance Shifts. And if you've ever wondered what it takes to achieve remarkable success, to overcome obstacles and transform your performance in the face of big change, then you're in the right place.
You are indeed. Welcome back to Performance Shift, the podcast that will take you on a journey of discovery and exploration and transformation and give you the tools to navigate your own moments of change.
My name is John Register, and I'm a two-time Paralympic athlete, a combat Army veteran, and I'm an author. And this is my amazing co-host.
Yes, Kat Koppett, an organizational consultant, author, and improviser. It doesn't matter how many times we do this, John. I'm so impressed by your one-sentence bio.
No, I'm always impressed with you. You're the one that got us here. Uh, you know, together we are sharing our expertise and insights into how we can navigate change and find success in the face of adversity.
You are here with us on LinkedIn Live. We're also anywhere you find your podcasts, you can listen in podcast form, share us, all of that.
And we are on season number 2.
Season 2.
Can you believe it? We have we have a first season done.
We have a first season because we stopped and now we're starting again.
Yeah, there was a lot of things that I took away from that first season. So many beautiful, amazing stories and amazing guests that were on. I mean, I turned on the TV and there's Dion Flynn on the Tonight Show, and then I'm looking around with some of the, we had Michelle Cohen on, and I had a chance to go to New York and sit with her for dinner, and it's just all these wonderful souls that we get in come in contact with. Who've been some of the guests that you have resonated with?
Well, we started with an astronaut.
Yes.
So that was exciting.
Gary Reisman, of course. Yeah.
Yes, of course. Yeah. And I mean, you can literally only go down from there, but we didn't, right? I mean, we
back to Earth.
Dion, who you just mentioned, is not only a performer on the Tonight Show, he's just been hired as a full-time writer on the show.
Oh my gosh.
So he's amazing. We've talked to a number of entrepreneurs. We've talked to Olympic athletes. Like, yes. I mean, it's really anyone that you can think of who is has an impressive story to tell would be at home in this environment.
Yeah, it was really incredible. So I want to just thank you for always showing up and offering your gifts. As we move into season number 2, we're shifting it up just a little bit. Going to shorten the time frame that we have to kind of give more of a strategic punch to the show. So can you share with us a little bit about the framework that we're coming up with and what we're going to be jumping into?
Sure. So we've mapped out 10 episodes for you, topics, and they're all around story in some way. We'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. But the story of the show will be about 15 minutes of us talking about a topic, sometimes with a guest, probably for these first 10 episodes, just the two of us.
Just the two of us.
Because that's really why we're here. We just have a love fest and we want to hang out together. Then we will, of course, play a little improv theater game, because how could we not? We're going to offer you some recommendations and get you back on your way.
Yeah, I really, a lot of the folks have been coming in. You've heard from some people. I've heard from some people that really enjoy these episodes. It's helping folks, and that's what we want to do. We want to, one of my things I say is breathe life and oxygen into the environment. So we're talking about stories in transition. We're talking about stories that we're telling ourselves, which would be like the next one, and selling stories. How do we sell our stories and make ourselves a lot of money? And then listening for stories, supporting stories, and then some others that we have on the second half of the show, or the second half of the season.
I feel like I have to share a story, which is when we were deciding whether to come back for season 2 or not, as much as we love each other, we're both juggling a lot of balls. A great friend and colleague of mine came up to me at the Mopco Improv Theater, where she volunteers and is a student with us. And she handed me this amazing thing, which I think you can see.
Look
It
at
is
that. Yeah, it's
a
beautiful. I'm gonna
crocheted rose.
I'm gonna
And
bring that up a little bit, bring you up a little bit on that one. See if I can do that. Oh, that's me. I want to do you. I want to put you up there. How do I do that? I don't know.
I don't know. Well, I think people
There we go. That's better.
can see, right? How
Yeah.
beautiful that is.
Oh my gosh, it's gorgeous.
And just speaking of story, she said to me, I knew that she'd been going through some life transitions that were difficult. And she said, I just wanted to give this to you. I made these for my wedding bouquet, and I'm handing them to people who have inspired me. And your show with John has just been really helpful as I've been going through this
Wow.
transition. And so, Jess, it's your fault that we're back. Well, I guess.
Thanks, Jess. So, I don't want to belabor the point, because we do want to, kind of keep these tight this time. You have just written a book. The book's coming out, The Facilitation Advantage.
Yep.
And I really like this framing of this wheel that you have. If you wouldn't mind, I just want you to share this kind of context, because this will set the foundation for a lot of the conversations we'll have a little bit later.
Great, I'd be happy to. So, yeah, I developed the framework and co-wrote the book with Therese Miklo, who we should have on at some point. And I'll give you a very quick overview of it for everyone, and then I think you'll see where it connects to our storytelling theme for the season and navigating change, I hope. So, the main idea with Facilitation Advantage is that facilitation is a core set of skills that all of us, especially those who are in some kind of leader position, whether it's formal or informal, can benefit from bringing consciously to the environments we're in. That there is this magic superpower of facilitation, which, as is inherent in the word facilitate, makes easier everything that's happening. So the idea with the book and the framework is, what are the skills, what are the contributions, we call them, that good facilitators make that help other people, not just themselves, solve problems, build community, and navigate change. Yeah. So you just flashed the wheel. There are 10 contributions. At some point there were 12, at some point there were 11. It's just sort of neat that there turns out to be 10, but we didn't plan it that way or force it into that. And they fall into three main buckets. A mindset bucket, which is about identifying and then modeling your beliefs and values in the world. I always think of you, John, when I think of that. You're someone whose story I tell a lot in that bucket. And also the other mindset bucket I think of you in is managing yourself. So how do you manage your energy? How do you manage your biases? How do you manage your triggers or hot buttons? So that's the mindset bucket. And in some ways it's the foundation of everything. And it's what we spend a lot of time talking about here on the podcast. The second bucket is content. And often when we're teaching or training or speaking, it's that bucket of sharing subject matter expertise that we can over-rotate on sometimes. So it's important to pick the right content and know what you have to share in the right context. And as you'll notice, it's only like a fifth of the wheel.
Yes.
And then everything else is about process. So how do we establish credibility and presence? How do we engage with story, which is a core theme of what we'll be talking about this season? How do you listen and receive information, which is as important as what you're saying or doing? All of that should be in service of whatever your intention or purpose is. And serving the purpose really has two sides to it: keeping on track and staying focused, and adapting in the moment for impact. both of which are things that we talk a lot about here. As a facilitator and leader, one of the things we hear a lot these days is um, people wanting to know, how do I create safe space? And at the same time, how do I challenge and grow my people? So the next contribution is balancing risk and safety, both your own willingness to feel safe but take risks, and also creating that space for other people. And then finally, explicitly supporting development, coaching, feedback, which of course is a huge part of what you do, John, uh, in lots of different ways.
Yeah, this is really, when I saw this and you presented it to me, a few weeks ago, I was like really blown away by how neatly it just fits inside of a model that can be easily explained. And I think part of it is because I'm always trying to tell a story that explains what I talk about, and I've never found quite the model that articulates it as much as you. So so congratulations on getting that. I think it's going to be wonderful to share in that context, and make sure we have that maybe in the show notes for folks to just to get and to see how we're thinking about this in story.
Yeah, and the book is due out, I think, formally around April, and we'll definitely invite Teresa on to talk more about our story and navigating the process of writing a book, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think as I look at this, and you kind of brought out some things, I have my framing is usually within inside of a keynote speech and helping people move from one area to the next. And in that framework, I talk about, this reckoning moment of realizing that some change has to happen. We can't go back to doing things the way they used to be.
Mm.
And then the second piece is this revision piece, this revision moment, or the revision. So we're recasting a vision. And the deeper work I've done now is inside of this revision, there has to be, which I have said before, a commitment to the vision. And I've not really leaned into the commitment is likened to an amputation.
Mm.
So I'm leaning more into that space as I've talked about it. And I think the reason why is because I've heard so many people say, "Oh, that's just too harsh." I said,
Well,
"Yeah, well, amputations hurt," you know.
yeah.
Um, so I'm really saying that, and then afterward, I was in a mastermind group setting, and everybody loved this amputate to amplify context. And then we started, wordsmithing it and workshopping it and pulling and that, as we all should do. And folks were a little bit like, well, maybe amputate is too negative a word. And then later on, one of our wasn't a facilitator, one of our group members said, "I just don't know what to release. I just don't know what to let go of." And I said, "Oh,
Aha.
that means you have to amputate that, and it's going to hurt." And they're like, "Oh my gosh, that is the right word. You're exactly right. That's your word. You need to use it and lean into it." So even with my hat I have on now, we have the merchandise, and that's amputate fear.
Fear.
Right? Because I don't think I know this is where I really am looking forward to is our stories and the stories we're telling ourselves, and leading, with story and gaps in our stories. I think those stories that we're telling ourselves aren't necessarily our stories, and we're going to talk about that. What I mean by that is we're usually trying to tell somebody else's story and fit ourselves into their
Oh,
story framework. So we have a harder time to make the commitments that we need to make in life because we're so busy looking at somebody else's story instead of honoring our own story, what we need to do. And then the final thing is, of course, the renewal. So once we kind of told our story, we make the commitment, we cut away those things that are no longer there. Now we move forward into this space where we grow to a place, a destination, which is the end of that piece of the journey, but knowing that that is a plateau for the next level of growth. Um, instead of climbing the corporate ladder, instead of climbing up in a rung on a rung, and so now we met this plateau. I really I begin to think about it's more in terms in my brain, it's more of stepping stones. And so I can honor the stone that I'm on. And then when I step to the next stone, I can't make it to the next stone unless I've had the previous stone. So I'm not trying to elevate over somebody. I'm trying to step to the next portion, the next stone. So that's what's kind of elevated in my thought process over the past few weeks. So love
Yeah.
some of your
Well,
thoughts on them.
I mean, I first of all, there's so many things I like about the framework as you've developed your framework, that you're bringing us now this sort of new revised story that you're sharing. One is its simplicity, right? You're
Yeah.
just distilling it down. Three is a lovely number, much better than 10. Uh, the other is just, I think, as we start to talk about story, we quote the cognitive psychologist Jerome Bruner a lot, as simply saying story is meaning. Yuval Harari also talks about human beings being storytelling animals, that's really what distinguishes us. And so when I hear you talk about amputating, this word amputate, and thinking about vision as having to not just paint a pretty picture and go towards it, but release or let go of something, and that's not easy, that there's a grief there or a loss there. I think that's a very powerful shift in the story that people are telling, you know.
Yeah, and
Yeah, no,
go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
no, just one other thing that I heard in what you were saying is this idea of who owns the story, like who is creating the story. And it's such a profound, when we think about leading or building cultures or connecting with other people or living our own lives and making our choices on all of those levels, this question of whose story gets to be told, who gets to craft the story, who gets to create the narrative. um, I just think that's very powerful. So
From
something,
Hamilton, who
yeah,
lives, who dies, who tells our
tell
story.
the story. Exactly right.
Yeah, I love going, having these conversations, and and we've started these such a long time ago, during the pandemic, kind of reconnecting and staying on these things on Saturday mornings and just going deeper. And one of the stories was just that, as I'm thinking about it, was, on February 28th or February 22nd, somewhere around there, I was speaking for Secretary Pompeo at the Ben Franklin room, and we're about to go into the pandemic, and half of the ambassadors that are in the room are career people, and half of the ambassadors are appointees from that former administration, and so there was this kind of rift in between the room of everybody's kind of getting their marching orders. We don't know if this pandemic is real or not, and all these things, but some of the ambassadors are being asked to leave their countries because the pandemic is so strong, it's overrunning those countries. So what narrative, what story are we telling, and how do we justify it if it's not the story that is the story of the place where I'm leading? How do I lead in that space? And so that's why I wrote my book, 10 Power Stories to Impacting Leader, Journey Way to Leadership Success, was to get that into their hands, because you have to tell it. You have to have some type of story, and that story better be a narrative that is in congruence with where you are in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, your story from the very beginning, your reckoning was about what the stories you were telling about yourself and your identity, and how you had to shift those, and how did circumstance challenge the stories that you had about yourself, and which ones didn't change. Like, you didn't become a worse or less valuable husband or father. In fact,
Right.
an argument could be made, ultimately it was a positive in those relationships.
Yeah.
But there were other stories that you had to release and let go. And yeah, I think for leaders to understand this, as you're saying in your example right now, um, the stories that their assumptions and the stories they're carrying with them into a situation, and to challenge those themselves. And then also, what is the story that they need to articulate and share forward and to inspire and motivate others?
That's right. So I know we're going to get into a game. For leaders that are out there listening right now, and kind of Kat alluded this, alluded to it as well. Connection and empathy stories they help us connect so much faster. So think about the stories you're telling. Think about the stories that are coming up that make you connect with your team better. The stories that make you connect with your peer group better, maybe in your families, and really pay attention to those stories that are there. My stories, I lean into the word inspire, because I believe that's breathing life into others. As life has been given to me, I need to breathe life into others. And so that is a narrative around inspiration. Inspiration, inspires, comes from the Latin word inspiro, which means to breathe into. So that is where I resonate, and I want to always inspire someone to act on the dreams, visions that they have in their life. So how are you showing up in that capacity of breathing life into other individuals, so that they can help the company go forward, help their life go forward, help whatever it is to move in a direction that expands, as our lungs fill with oxygen and our chest expands. We want to expand that into the lives of those that we might be leading.
Wow. Yes. Let's do that.
Boom, boom.
So you said that we're going to play a game. I feel like, I had some ideas, but as we're having this conversation, I feel like what's coming up for me is that, in an improvisational way, is uh, an activity that we do sometimes with teams that want to enhance their sense of inclusion
Mm,
and belonging,
mhm,
and embracing difference, which is to have people think about a quality or a characteristic or an identifier that they have. And it could be something that's visible, or it could be something that's, under the surface, if you've seen that iceberg model, right? So uh, being a veteran isn't something someone might necessarily know about you, but
mm,
it's with me, being married, being a mom, right, may not immediately show up as something that you see. Um, but those are also qualities. So picking one of those and then telling the story of how that characteristic has informed you or
mm.
helped you in your life or in your role as a leader. So I'll give an example, and then I'm going to invite you. This is easy for you. I know you do it all the time, but we'll
Sure.
demo it and we can offer it out to people to share. Um, so there are a million things that I could choose, right? And like I just said, I'm a mother. We talked about being an author, but I'm going to choose something which uh, is popping up for me as maybe something that people don't immediately know about me, but feels influential. So I I'm Jewish. I grew up in a very sort of secular Jewish household. So my parents were highly intellectual. They were very identified with their Judaism, but we weren't very religious, right? So my brother was bar mitzvahed. We went to synagogue on the high holidays, but sort of the way some folks go to church on Christmas and Easter. That was sort of our. And so for a while, I didn't. It took me a while to sort of figure out how had that influenced me. And what
Mhm,
I realized as a leader and as a facilitator was that at the core of my parents' Jewish philosophy was this um, value around learning and questioning.
mm,
So the way that you study Torah as Jews is you actually study um, commentary called the Talmud. So if you look at the Talmud, there's like a page of the Torah or the Bible, and then around that is commentary by first century rabbis. And then around that is commentary by 3rd century rabbis. And you sit with a partner like this, and you debate or discuss the meaning and the commentary that other people, and the meaning and the meaning and the meaning. And that's why one of the jokes that people sometimes tell is, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. So, because the investigation and the questioning is part of the practice, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to like, this is the dogma. And so I realized that growing up in a house where people were sort of arguing and debating ideas all the time was this value that I had. There was something valuable about that to me. And it's allowed me, I think, to be a lifelong learner and to bring that to the table as a facilitator and a leader, sort of being able to surf polarities and hold lots of different conflicting ideas all at the same time.
It's very interesting you say that, and I have another whole different take. I'm going to go be vulnerable on really vulnerable on mine. My uncle Gloucester, who was one of the principals in charge on all the platform speakers in 1963 on the March on Washington. So he organized all that. And last person to see Medgar Evers alive in Mississippi, executive branches in NAACP. And then my dad, who was jailed in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and I always want to correct this because most people say to get blacks the right to vote. But the right to vote was already given in the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. It was the actual to exercise that right, because so many people had blocked it. So he was jailed in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, for that. And exactly what you just said, around the table, there was debate. And people debated the opposite of their viewpoint and opinion, and I didn't really understand this because I was a little tyke, in this household around the Thanksgiving Day table and whatnot, and would see this. It was amazing. So that was I loved how you just shared that. It brought that memory back for me.
Wow.
In that.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Mine is I don't like what people don't know about me is I don't like confrontation. I hate confrontation. When I was in Oak Park, Illinois, and I saw a group of guys coming down one side of the street, I'd walk on the other side of the street, or I cut through your yard, or I go to some. I just did not want, and it was all a story I was telling myself in my mind about what's going to happen. I probably could just walk through the folks who are coming my way. No one's going to bother me. But in my mind, I was telling this fear story, and later on, how that played out was I took an executive role as an acting CEO. And there was so much confrontation in it with community members, with inside the organization itself, sponsors. And I had to really confront that and seek assistance and help. So it really helped me to understand the resilience, not from the standpoint of the bounce back, but resilience from the standpoint of being able to ask for help, to ask for assistance, which then coupled itself with when I had my injury in the hospital, lying in the hospital room, and I can't do anything for myself. I had to ask for support. And I think as we're having, this dialogue globally around mental health now, these are the things that happen where we don't necessarily ask for the support that we need because we need to be seen as competent. We need to be seen as being put together. We need to be seen as we know everything that's in our world and is going great. And that's the facade that we put on to people instead of really asking for what we need and allowing that to help us move through life better. I still don't like confrontation, but I have some skills now that help me get through it. And I know that I can. So that's my growth in that space, in that area.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks for that. That's good. I like that. You got me all emotional this day. So as we get ready to wrap this show for this one, any insights that you have, or and I know we want to support the audience with a book. I was trying to pull it up, but I don't have it in front of me. But I wanted to make sure that we got it out there.
You have a book to recommend.
Promote, yeah. Well, I just started reading it, and I've had it for a long time, but I just never really read it. And like all the other books on my shelves, they're there. They look good. Um, but it's by a woman. She's just amazing. Her name is Tamsin Webster, and she wrote a book a little while ago called "Find Your Red Thread."
Mm.
So some people call it your through line or things, but it's "Find Your Red Thread." It's out there. You can get it on Amazon, and I like it because she talks about kind of two things in finding story, and what really, not even more than story, what makes kind of, what is your essence of who you are. So you have to not only, number one, go and slay the monster, but you also have to get out of the maze too. So she talks about the Greek myth. I can't remember the Greek um, person had to go
Yeah,
kill
Theseus?
the Minotaur. Huh?
Is it Theseus?
Theseus, yes, Theseus. So going to slay the Minotaur, and then has to find his way out. So he pulls a red thread through, so that he can retrace his steps to get out of the maze. And so oftentimes we'll slay the monster, but we get out. We don't know how we got out. So we have to. So we know now how to get out and help other people out of their mazes. So I'm just starting to read the book, and it's really a fascinating read for that. So I recommend that. Find Your Red Thread by Tamsin Webster.
Well, I'm going to have to add it to my list of books.
Right.
My favorite word that I learned during the pandemic is a Japanese word, which is, I might pronounce it wrong, it's sundoku, which is the Japanese word for the stack of books you've purchased but haven't read.
So, Sundoku. Yep. That's I have a lot of Sundoku. I guess that
I will add the Red Thread book to that.
Yeah. So I'm determined. I'm making a determination to get through some of these books. I finished reading another book. I'll say that in a couple of weeks of what it was, and another brilliant book person. So yeah. So thank you. This was great, Kat. I'm always amazed by how you just pull things together. And so are we ready to kind of wrap the show
I
today?
think we are. We're just a few minutes over our promised 30 minutes.
Yes.
I'm so delighted at all of the red threads that we've started to sort of tie, and that we promise we will get you through the maze of the next 10 episodes following that red thread.
Oh, I love that.
To be back.
That's why she's the improviser, tying it all together with the red thread.
With the red thread.
Everyone, thanks for being on today's episode of Performance Shift. We hope you enjoyed our discussion, gained some insights, some valuable insights that you can apply to your own work in life. You can find Kat Koppett at Koppett, Koppett.com, Koppett.com, and you can find myself at johnregister.com. If you want to learn more about the power of transformation and how you can shift your own performance to achieve your goals and dreams, be sure to subscribe to our podcast and join us for our next episode. We'll be on in 2 weeks from now, live. And so come back in 7:30. And if you found this episode helpful, we'd love if you would just leave a review on your favorite podcast channel. Your feedback helps us to improve the show and reach more listeners like you. Have a great day. Kat Koppett, John Register saying, go forth, inspire your world, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.